Welcome to another episode of the Learneezee cast. Pat, how are you today?
I'm all right, Rico. It's just came back from vacation and I'm feeling good, but I'm also a little bit missing the vacation already. Yeah, how are you doing, Rico, in Colombia?
Well, I'm past the halfway point of this road trip I'm embarking on with my brother. I find myself on the Colombian coast. And what's been so remarkable about this trip is that every city I've traveled to, I have found elements of each of them that I truly enjoy. I find Colombia to be a fascinating country, so beautiful, incredibly safe. I think the one thing I would tell anybody is just how safe I have felt driving hours on end from city to city. And not one time have I felt unsafe. And it's been very,
Wow,
very rewarding and very eye opening and in a very positive way.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, it sounds lovely. And so, uh, is there anything that we should catch up on, or should we get right to the interview?
Well,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say what's been on my mind is just content creation. I listened to an interview of Nasir Yassin, the founder of Nas Daily, with Guy Raz, the NPR host from How I Built This. And very, very interesting look at the content creator economy and even what constitutes a creator. And here we are approaching 3 years of this podcast and not realizing all along before I even embarked on this journey to become a content creator with his program that you and I have been creating content for nearly 3 years with this podcast. So it's very eye opening to just think about content creation. And I would just challenge anybody rather than just consuming news and media and content, why not try your hand at creating your own content, whatever that is?
If you're in the place where we were years ago when we were thinking, can you do it? No, just try it and see if it's for you. But the idea is you're going through it, you're learning by doing, and sometimes that process also leads you to great connections, learning about new things because you have to do some research and some work in the background. So I totally agree. Folks should be encouraged, not just by us, but in general, to try to create their own little bit of content.
I think it's about being active versus being passive. I think that by being creative, you are using your energies and your creativity to put something out into the universe versus just solely consuming and being receptive. So that would be something I would encourage anybody listening to this to just, you don't have to create a podcast or a TikTok account, but just any sort of content, whatever it is, and share it with the world. It's so easy to do these days. How about you, Pat? Is anything that's been on your mind at all that you wanted to share? I know you got back from what was it,
From
Belgium?
vacation, yeah, Belgium, Antwerp, yeah, that was a great trip. I had a great time with my partner visiting different parts of the city of Antwerp, and we also went to I think it's called Brugge, a very ancient city near the coast, and it was very touristic but very nice as well. And then we got to go to the coast, and it's just lovely to put your feet in the sand, even though it was cold. It was still a nice feeling, and
It's
I say
Europe.
to
It's not Colombia, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
in,
That's the
in
difference
April.
in Europe.
Yeah.
In April, so let's be real here. But it was still nice. It was a great feeling to take a little time off. It's important to take time for yourself to clear your head, and I was happy to take that time off. And I would say to others, especially in the U.S., because in Europe it's almost mandatory that you take your vacation time. Please take time off so you can take care of yourself. So that's all I have on my mind, and I'm looking forward to getting into our interview.
Yes, we have a very dynamic guest, and let's just go ahead and jump into the interview. Well, we've reached that time in our show, our Experts Corner, where we interview experts in various fields. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Francesca Carlin. And so get ready to be inspired as we chat with her. She's a coach and trainer in communication, leadership, and career and life design. Francesca's journey began in the theater world, and she later transitioned to coaching business professionals and academics through transformational coaching and design thinking, helping individuals discover their true paths in life and career. She holds a Bachelor and Master of Fine Arts in Acting, a Master of Arts in Russian, and accreditation as a transformational coach through Animus, and a certified Designing Your Life coach. Today, we dive deeper into her journey, exploring how people can make long-lasting changes in their lives. So let's go ahead and get started. And we would love to hear what you have to say, Francesca. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for the absolutely lovely introduction. That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you both about the work that I do.
Well, thank you again for coming on to the show. We always like to just to dive right into the questions to get the conversation rolling. And then, of course, feel free to take the questions in any direction you like. But as this is a podcast where we interview a lot of people who are expats living in a second or even third country, our first question typically is, where are you from originally, and what languages do you speak?
So I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the U.S. And I speak, of course, English is my mother tongue, and I speak Russian, some French, and some German as well, and a
Very
little bit
interesting.
of Korean. Yeah.
A little bit of Korean.
Mhm.
Can you tell us how you started your acting journey and how maybe you landed into coaching? That's a big topic, but you can start to tell us how did you get into acting?
Yeah, that's a long, long story, but I'll give the kind of the shorter version of it. I just always, ever since I was younger, I loved stories and I was always interested in the theater and becoming an actress. And it was one of those weird sort of childhood ideas that I had that I would be an actress, and I actually became one. So I worked in New York, I worked in England. It was a really wonderful time, and actually my theater studies eventually brought me to Moscow, Russia, where my master's program was connected with the Moscow Arts Theater there. And I ended up staying there to do some extra studying. And then 1 year turned into 14 years.
Wow,
And
yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. But I have always coached people, because when you're an actor, you very often need to coach people as well. You don't always have the privilege of just acting all the time. And to be honest, it's the best thing for your craft too, right? You become more knowledgeable when you can teach it, because you have to go kind of deeper into the subject. And so I started to teach drama and also to direct some plays. And it was really the coaching, I mean, teaching and coaching actors that really got me interested in what I do now, which is coaching outside of the theater for business and academic professionals.
And was there one point specifically where you knew, I actually want to go ahead and pivot now? This is something that I've enjoyed acting, I've enjoyed directing and coaching students and teaching. I've enjoyed it so much that maybe I want to take this on as a new career field. Was there any one particular moment?
I don't know if there was one particular moment. I think everybody has these moments in their lives when they are following, a career they think or they've invested in that they think is their lifelong career. And at some point, they become extremely dissatisfied. And that was me. I had become extremely dissatisfied. And theater is like wonderful, but it's never very well paid and it's not a very stable profession.
Understood.
Um, yeah. So eventually, I just was very burned out, and I just started to look for a new direction. And that's actually when I stumbled across Designing Your Life, that book in particular. That was sort of a pivot for me, actually, reading that book when it first came out in 2016.
Great. And so in reading your bio, I did mention, of course, that you have two different certifications, accreditations. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about them, the transformational coach through Animus, as well as the life design coaching? I think those are two specific certifications, accreditations. Correct me if I'm incorrect in speaking those terms. But just for our audience who may not be very familiar with those.
Yeah, so I mean, coaching is a field that is unregulated, and there are some guidelines for coaching, and the International Coaching Federation is one body that offers guidelines and also accreditation, which I also have an ACC accreditation there from there as well. And so programs are certified through that program to say, like, yes, they meet standards. And so that's what these coaching programs are about, is about making sure that coaches are walking out into the career with the tools they actually need to help their clients. And there's kind of twofold on how I got involved in coaching. That one side of Designing Your Life is something that like I said, back in 2016, when the book Designing Your Life came out by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, that I read that book and I started working through that book, and that's just opened a door for me. And I realized that I had all these transferable skills that I had never thought of before. And so I kind of wandered through a few iterations of a career before I landed on what I do now. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Patrick, I see you wanted to say something, so
You know,
I'll go
I
back
was
to you.
curious, yeah, because I know you also from doing also some teaching as well for language learners, and so I'm kind of curious how you combine all those skills with your skills as a teacher and actress into like a coaching session. Could you give us a little bit of a taste of what a session would be like with you? Is it always virtual, or do you meet people in person, or is like you can give us a little bit of a taste, of maybe the audience a taste of what it would be like to work with you? Maybe, yeah, that would be great. I think we're
Yeah.
all curious.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sort of depends what context the client is coming from,
Mhm.
right? So if the client is coming from academia, that's very often a different context than if a client is looking to make a big career change, and from outside of academia. But, basically what I think teaching does, it gives people, or it gave me the tools to
Mhm.
organize myself and to structure myself, probably even more so for the trainings that I do,
Okay,
um,
okay. Hmm.
than the coaching per se.
Hmm.
So the trainings I do, I'm always looking to match the exercises I give to the people in my trainings with the learning outcomes. I'm always
Okay,
looking to see, pedagogically how things go and how they flow and if they make sense. So that teaching experience that I had formerly really helped me in my training business when I started to put together sort of my own curriculum,
okay,
basically.
I understand that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So
But
just
coaching is
connecting
a
it.
little bit
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I mean. With the coaching, then that's more of a one-on-one experience. And are you generally doing it in such a way that you focus on, like, do you do an intake first with your client? Like, what are the steps to begin the coaching process that you usually
Yeah.
implement for maybe designing your life? That would be interesting for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the process is pretty much, well, it's not the same, but it's similar for each area, for transformational coaching and for designing your life. And very often, I mean, those two work together as well. And so basically, of course, I meet with the client first because I want to understand if we have the right chemistry. That's like important because that's the person you're going to be talking to. You want to make sure that the client feels comfortable with me, that I also feel that I can help the clients, with what they need and provide that space for them. And unlike teaching, teaching is all about passing information to another
Exactly.
person,
Hmm.
but coaching is actually providing a space for the client to find the information within themselves, because we believe in coaching that the client is already whole. They're not
Oh,
broken,
interesting.
they're whole, they have all the answers. It's just that they need the space and the guidance to help get those answers out of them. So it's different than mentoring. Mentoring is providing some direct advice, some guidelines, some maybe things for people to try out. But coaching is the exact opposite. It's holding a space for people so that they can actually hear themselves and hear their own ideas. So I think the number one skill in coaching is listening. And then the second skill would be asking questions.
Listening and asking questions. So I'm curious if you have a specific focus in terms of the types of clients you like to work with, one, and then two, how frequently are you meeting with your clients and for what amount of time? Like, how long would a coaching of a session or a program, I don't know how you would sort of couch that, but what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it just depends on what the client wants to have as an outcome for their coaching sessions. So with Designing Your Life, I offer a group coaching experience. And so that, because it's really important in when you're designing something to have input from others,
Hmm.
right? It's sort of like testing the road out, bringing a car and hitting the asphalt. You get a little bit of road under your feet that way. And that's in the testing and prototyping, especially so very useful. So in the group coaching experience, before they enter into the group coaching experience, I do meet with them individually to see if, what they're looking for, what they need. Is the group coaching experience the right experience for them? And so on and so forth. And then usually we have another individual meeting after the group sessions are completed to make sure that they have found their feet. And the idea of with designing your life is to give the clients some tools that they can use and explore with, and then they can take with them, right? We don't want a person to be dependent on coaching forever, right? We want a person to have a moment with coaching and go like, all right, I got it. I got some insights, and I have some more tools under my belt that I can continue on alone. And then with transformational coaching and also individual designing your life coaching, then we meet and we usually set up, usually runs between 3 and 6 sessions is how many sessions people tend to do individually. And sometimes they do them more intensely, like every week or every other week. And sometimes they do them in a more kind of relaxed way where they have more time to explore on their own. And so maybe it'll be 2 sessions a month for 3 months. Mm-hmm.
In designing your life, you're using some of the concepts around design thinking to structure the whole coaching process. So do you have a feeling that you have to come back and see how the prototyping went? Do you set up follow-up meetings to see if the first prototype worked, and then you have to rework that prototype of the life that you're helping your clients design? Like how is that process work of checking and iterating through this designing phase? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many people are familiar with design thinking, but because I know that, yeah, design thinking is a bit, sometimes people are familiar with the term, but they don't actually know what the steps are. And I want to just say that, like, part of these steps are not, so basically it's like grammar, I would say. Language was invented before grammar was discovered, right?
Exactly.
Grammar is an organic thing that happens with language, and design thinking is an organic thing that comes out of designing and creating. So it's basically people saw the creative process, and they started to say, okay, what are the things that we see across all these creatives when they're making stuff? What are the steps they're all seeming to take?
Yes.
And then they identified those steps. Those steps can change, and they don't always have to be in order. But those are the kind of the basic ideas. So you have, first you want to empathize, right? You want to empathize, and that's sort of the first step of the designing process.
Yeah.
And because we're working on ourselves, we're empathizing with ourselves. We're trying to gather as much information about ourselves and our lives and our likes and our dislikes and our values and so on and so forth. And so that's usually the first step of design thinking in general, is to emphasize with your customer or your client, right? And design thinking, designing your life, your client is yourself, basically. But we do have one extra step. We have this extra step in this designing your life process that comes before empathizing, which is called accepting.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's just about accepting things as they are, right? So you have to accept some basic things and you have to have some reframes on things. So maybe there are some things that are getting in your way already of thinking about changing a career. Like for me, it was that I felt like I was too old to make a career shift because I had invested 20 years into a career. And I thought, no way. And I had to reframe that for myself. I had to say to myself, you know what is too old to do anything, right? I could do the same thing and just continue to be miserable another 20 years down the line, or I can make a shift now. So for me, I had to accept some things, right? Like my age and reframe it.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So there's accept and then like define, emphasize, and then we have this define. And here, defining in the design thinking process is usually defining the problem or the challenge, right, that people are having. And in here, it's for us when we're doing designing your life, it's defining the question. What is the question we want to ask? What is the question we're curious about? Is that question is like, how do I have a more joyous life? Or how do I have more fun in my career? Or how do I feel more fulfilled? Right? Whatever the question is, that's the question we start to explore. And then out of that process, we start to ideate. And so ideation is the next step. Ideation is just starting to have as many ideas as possible. And you never question them. You just put them out there. You put them on a sheet. You put them on the wall, wherever you'd like them, just to get them out. And out of that ideation process, now you have some material to work with. And so then you can start pulling ideas and start figuring out what you want to prototype and test.
Yes.
Which are the last two steps. And those steps continue on, prototyping and testing. I'm still prototyping and testing my career as I go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where coaching comes into great use, because then you have someone to help you maybe make better decisions in that prototyping testing process. Well, if you're doing it alone, it can be challenging. You might use that bias. You might have that bias that comes with the self-doubt that you were speaking about, when you need to accept certain things before going through the process again.
Well, thank you for sharing your own journey in regards to some of the doubts or concerns that you had about your own career. And you kind of went through a lot of these steps that I think kind of answer maybe my next question. But I was just kind of curious, for people who maybe aren't necessarily aware of design thinking or the coaching that's out there, do you have just some tips for people who are just questioning their purpose and trying to find more meaning in their careers and lives, just as like a first start? Is it reading the book that you read? Are there other tips or suggestions you can give our audience, just as a kind of like, hey, if you haven't done this, you might want to consider this?
Yeah, there's a few tips. I don't have like a list of tips, but I can give you some things that come to mind.
Yeah.
Reading the book Designing Your Life by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, absolutely very useful and helpful. They also have a lot of videos on YouTube as well, explaining that kind of process more and the ideas behind it. And then I would say, one thing that is really useful for me and for everyone, I think, is to separate the shoulds from the things that you want to do. So we have a lot of shoulds in our life. I should do this. I should be that. My career should be like this. But they really limit us, because I would say 9 times out of 10, something I should do doesn't necessarily make me feel happy, right? Or make me feel fulfilled.
It's true.
Yeah. So it's about finding that balance about between those shoulds and those and the desires and the wants that you have. And then I think the second thing I would say is to look at your values. What are the things that are really important to you truly in life? And that changes as we get older, right? And as we go through different phases in our life, we just value different things. I mean, we have maybe hundreds of values, but there's always this kind of core values, like those 3 to 5 core values that are constantly sort of shifting and changing as we are shifting and changing. And to identify those values for yourself, because, maybe being recognized and being recognized for your work and being ambitious was something that was very prominent for you as a value when you were younger, but now you're older and you actually want to have more meaning. You want to derive more meaning from your work. You want to make more of an impact. You're more interested in community, right? And sometimes, we need to redesign the career that we already have, or redesign our job just by finding aspects of our jobs that we can shift our focus a bit to align with our current values. So that's another tip I would give. And then maybe the last tip I would give to people would be that I would say track your activities during the day, mark them all down, and see which activities bring you joy and give you energy, or where you find flow, and what activities take your energy or break your flow or feel like drudgery. And just make a list without judgment, just to see, and use it as data, right? Like you can look at that later as data. I work with a lot of academics, so a lot of scientists. Data is really important. And
That's a
it's
good point.
important for us too. It helps us gives us perspective on things. When we can look at things like data, we get a little distance from them. We can say, oh, actually, there's this aspect of my job that I love that gives me so much energy, but I'm doing a lot of other stuff that's bringing me down. And maybe it's just about rearranging your schedule and, managing your energy levels. So something like that can be very useful, just writing down the activities and what kind of flow or energy you get from them.
Well, thank you for those tips. Yeah, those are some really great, I think, actionable tips that our audience will definitely, even myself included, will take note of for sure.
Anything else, Rico? Would you like to ask?
Well, so for me personally, I was just curious. I saw on your bio on your website that you're developing a self-efficacy workshop and how people can make long-lasting changes. Is that work different from the current coaching that you're doing? And if so, how is it different? If you care to share, if it's still under wraps and you're still working on it, I don't mean you to have
Yeah,
you spill
don't
the
give
beans,
away
but
any, top secret content.
No, I'm happy to share. You know, I think self-help and self-development has become such a sort of a fad, right? Like a trend in some ways, where people are just devouring books after books and they're moving on from one idea of thinking to another idea of thinking, and myself included, right? And I think what research has shown us is actually there are some foundational tools that we can tap into that can help us make lasting changes. And that's where I'm really headed as a coach and a trainer, is that I'm less interested in giving people like tips and tricks and more interested in giving people skills that they can use and tools that they can use again and again and again throughout their lives, so that they can have this ability to affect change at any point in time.
Oh, cool. Wow, that's great.
So that's the idea behind self-efficacy, is that we learn what kind of conditions we need in order to be motivated and productive, and we work at recreating those conditions again and again for ourselves. And it goes deeper than that, and there's more principles behind self-efficacy, but that's about all the work that I'm doing, is about finding how it resonates with us in a core manner, in a core way that we can integrate it and use it long term.
I do have one more question. I'm sorry to keep on peppering with questions. I know we're wrapping things up here, but I could spend
I'm trying my
hours.
best to give her,
No,
as much
it's
time as she
great.
needs. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you have so many areas of expertise. I saw, storytelling, design thinking, designing your life, resilience, imposter syndrome, self-development, but also helping people with presentation skills and building confidence. And the building confidence piece is something that really resonates with me on a personal level. So I was curious, is there anything, just maybe one or two things that you suggest that people do or can try to build their self-confidence? Things that, again, giving people skills, not just ideas, but actual strategies perhaps that can help them build their self-confidence.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting thing, because I'm not so big on this idea of self-confidence as other people are.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, because I think it's been very often we've seen somebody who is very self-confident, but they can't really deliver, right?
It's true.
Or
Yeah,
somebody who is not very confident, but is really knowledgeable and has a lot to give, right? And I think so. Self-confidence to me is kind of two-sided. And one side of it is how people perceive you, because I can appear with all my acting training confident, even when I'm not confident. I've learned how to do that. And that's
that's
a very
great.
easy set of skills to give to people, right? But I think when people are talking about confidence, they're looking on the more kind of the inner world of a person and how they feel. And I would say, you know what? Feelings come and go, but competence is something that always stays and you can build on, right? And so that's what the I think people should work on, is competence, feeling competent. And I think confidence, if you want to look confident, there's lots of ways that you can look confident. But I think what is lasting is actually to work on your competence,
I
and
like that.
then to trust and to know that your competence is there, because that's all your strengths are what going to get you. Those are the things that are going to get you out of a difficult situation, right? And not your confidence necessarily. So that's what I say. But as far as like tips and tricks, I mean, or as far as like advice, I would say, I think this goes back to self-efficacy, that a big part of it, because self-efficacy and confidence share a lot of things in common, right? And part of that is feeling competent. And so that idea of mastery is something that you can work on. So if you want to build the feeling of confidence, then I would say work on something small that you can master. And once you master something, you feel, of course, more competent and therefore more confident about doing it. And so just anytime you have a big challenge, to break it down in smaller steps and try to master each of those small steps in order to build your confidence up for the bigger picture, the bigger step that you're ultimately going to reach.
Well, thank you so much for providing that insight. I think it is really
great.
good to hear that, again, people have, like you said, a difference of opinions. There's so many, schools of thought and ideas. But like really what you're saying is if you are competent, you have this sort of like silent knowledge that, I'm capable of doing whatever needs to be done, regardless of how people perceive you. If you can do the thing you're being asked to do, that in and of itself is a great way to just show your ability and maybe project a certain level of confidence. Again, this has been a very, very insightful interview. I've taken many mental notes. I'll be reviewing the notes from the show as well and sharing those. But do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share, Francesca, at all that we haven't asked about?
One thing that came to mind as we were talking is this idea of failure. And because that also is what I think stands in the way sometimes of people feeling confident. They're worried about failure. But I would like to say that failure is absolutely necessary. And in fact, I'd like to reframe failure and say, okay, let's talk about what works and what doesn't work.
I like that.
Because it takes it to be something more neutral, right? Okay,
Exactly,
that doesn't work. That works. It's just data. And then we're free to fail or to fail, right? Because
Yeah,
we
exactly.
need to.
That's hard to say.
Yeah, we need to in order to design or to create the lives that we want, right? And this is part of our story. Like when we design a career, we're creating our own story of our life. We're living our story. And part of the reason why I'm so invested in stories is because they show you what humans can do. And there's always a challenge, and there's always a failure, and there's always a triumph. And
Exactly.
so we have to allow ourselves to experience all of those things. And so that would be what I would say about that, is reframing the idea of failure into something more neutral and positive as what works and what doesn't work, and knowing that's a part of the human experience.
Well, thank you for that last, again, just another nugget of wisdom and tidbit of information. I would love to leave our audience with the opportunity, if they would love to connect with you. Is there a way you would like people to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is a great place to reach out to me on. There's a little contact form as well as my email there, and that is dyl-coaching.com.
We just really appreciate that you came onto our little podcast, Francesca. We're looking forward to seeing your Design Your Life program grow, and hopefully we can cooperate in other ways in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Francesca, for your time. I want to wish you all the best, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, what a fantastic interview. I really learned so much from Francesca. What an incredible dynamic woman she is. We will put her contact information in the show notes and description of our episode. But again, thank you, listeners, for listening and watching, and keep learning easy.